Hello, everybody. Welcome to our week one class for pathways. Today, we're going to talk about, just do a kind of a brief introduction. We're going to talk about the left, middle, and right pathways and how you incorporate that into your practice, as well as some misconceptions. So, what I want to do is go ahead and introduce myself, and then we'll go over the syllabus. So, my name is Carla. You can call me Professor Carla, Carla. It doesn't matter. Either way is fine. This is my second semester teaching in the academy, and I consider myself to be a kitchen slash green slash eclectic witch. My great grandmother was a green witch. My great great aunt was a hedge witch. So those are both kind of in my family, but I tend to lean more towards the green and kitchen pathways. The kitchen pathway is a little more of my own, and those will make more sense to you as we progress through this class. Once you learn what those are, that'll make more sense. I am a mother. I've got a toddler. She's 3 and she's a handful. I'm also married and we have 2 dogs. My house is very loud most of the time. I have one room that I tend to go into record to try to keep it a little bit quieter so there's not so much background noise. But this is also the room the dogs like to come in, so it's a little bit loud. So please excuse any background noise that you hear. If you hear any screaming or anything, it's my kid. She's fine. She's playing. It is what it is. And I'm also a business owner. I'm an artist. I've been in the academy since it started almost, give or take a week or two, I believe. And I'm currently an admin here as well as the head of the Dryad House and a few other things. I'm sure you've seen me around. You've probably seen me in chat rooms. Maybe you've had me in class before. Yeah, so that's pretty much who I am. I am always going to be available for you all for instant messages if you want to send me a message. I also have an email address, and I'll get to that when we go over the syllabus. Let's go ahead and dig into that. This course is to give you an introduction into the pathways of witchcraft, as well as some common misconceptions. We're only going to have time to cover about 14 pathways. Ultimately, I'm hoping that we'll have a second pathways class where we can discuss even more. But for now, we're just going to cover these 14. These are the ones I tend to see the most often, but these are not going to be the only ones. There are literally probably hundreds of pathways. So you don't really need much for this course. I would just suggest that you have a notebook, or some people are even using note apps on their phones for taking notes. Either way is perfectly fine, whatever works for you. And this is kind of what you can expect. On Tuesdays, I'm going to post a link to our video class. And what I do, some of you already follow me on YouTube. So if you're not, feel free to follow me on YouTube. It's just Professor Carla, but you'll see that whenever I post this video. I like to post all of my videos in one place. That way you all can easily access them and go back to them whenever you need to. The reason I do it this way is just out of past experiences and having been a student myself. I find that it's easier to be able to just go ahead and pre-record these for you. There's no designated class time. It's a lot easier to fit this into your schedule when it's convenient for you. So this just seems to work a little bit better. Plus, I like having all the classes in one place on my YouTube channel so that you can easily just reference those. So on Fridays, our class aide, it's Babsy, and I'm positive you've seen her around. She's very, very active. Babsy is going to be putting together some quiz or trivia games for you all, and she'll be releasing those on Friday. It should be a lot of fun. We definitely, encourage you all to participate in that. It'll just kind of be a good way to test your knowledge and have a little bit of fun with the material that we're going over. So I definitely would encourage that. And we will do homework questions. So whenever I post the video classes on Tuesday, I'll include the homework questions with that class. I'll also go ahead and post them textually in our class chat, our class channel where I post the assignments. That way you can just quickly reference them instead of having to go back through the video. And whenever you answer those questions, you can just put them in our class homework channel. And with all of our other basic level courses, this one included, everything for this class is totally optional. Obviously, we would encourage you to do the material, do the assignments, because that does help you learn. It does, make sure that things are retained a little bit better. But we also know that everyone has a real life, everyone has family and hobbies, and we all have other things going on. Things come up. So we definitely understand if you're not able to do that. Also, if I ever post a question that maybe is a little too personal for you, or you just don't really want to share that answer with the class, you do not need to respond to that. You can just answer the ones you feel comfortable responding to. That's perfectly fine. Or maybe you want to send those questions, those answers to me. That's okay too. Whatever works for you. No commitment here. I definitely encourage you to do it, but whatever works for you. We don't want anybody to be uncomfortable. There will be a final project for this class, and basically it's going to be a written assignment. And it's not going to be a huge assignment. It's really just going to be you reflecting on all the pathways that we have gone over this semester and telling me which one or which ones fit your practice the best and why that is. That's really all that it is. It's not going to be a huge thing. I know everyone has other classes as well as this one. So this class will be very, very low maintenance. We're not going to have, like super heavy material. Most of these classes will be pretty short and sweet to the point. I just know that a lot of students are taking upper level classes as well, and those are very dedicated. There's a lot of required work for those. And then some people are taking more than the 5 classes we recommended, which is, that's totally fine. So I'm just trying to keep the workload to a minimum with this class where I'm available to. So also, if you want to send me an email, or if you want to get me my office hours, that information is on our syllabus. The link to our syllabus should be in one of our channels. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that in the beginning. But let's go over our schedule. So for the first week today, we're going to be talking about our introduction, misconceptions, left, middle, and right. Next week, we're going to do the kitchen and green witch. On week 3, we'll be talking the cosmic and sea witch. Week 4, I will actually be out for vacation, so Babsy will be with you, and we will be discussing the secular and eclectic witch. Week 5, lunar and elemental. Week 6 is animist and hereditary. 7, we're going to be talking about chaos and Luciferian. And then our last week of formal lessons for week 8, we'll talk about the hedge and Christian witch. And then the very last week of classes, we won't have any formal class. That will just be the week that your final project is due. And again, it's a really simple project, so don't stress about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and dig into the material today. So what is a pathway? So almost every witch, as they're developing their craft, will sometimes transform their pathway. Maybe they discover new pathways. Your pathway can be ever changing and ever developing. It is purely a way for you to categorize your own practice. And with some people, and I include myself in this, what you say about what your pathway is could be representative of your past, present, and future, or one or the other, all of them, it doesn't matter. So for me, I include the green witch pathway in my own practice because I was brought up with my great-grandmother who also followed that pathway. So it resonates with me, and I've incorporated a lot of that into my own path. But basically, it is just a way for you to describe it. But it's very, very unique to you. You are never going to have 2 witches that practice their craft the same way. Everyone is different. And whenever we're going through these different pathways, you'll find that it tends to be very generic, and it's a kind of a blanket description. And the reason that is because for example, every green witch uses their craft and knowledge in a different way than other green witches. And that seems a little bit confusing because it does seem that whenever you're going to categorize yourself into a pathway, that you would have in common many things with other people on the same pathway, and you might, but you also may not. Think of it in a different way. Let's talk about it in relation to something like religion, just for an example, And everybody's a different religion. There's all kinds of religions out there. So You might have someone that's considers himself a Christian, but you might have someone who considers himself a Baptist. Those two practices may overlap in certain ways. There may be a lot of things that the Christian practices, that the Baptist practices as well, but there may be things that they do not. But within those two religions, independently, two different Baptist believers, followers, they may practice their religion a little bit differently. Hence why there are different churches. You might have, the First Baptist Church on this end of your county, but maybe you've got, the Main Street Baptist on that end. And both of those churches, while they claim to be Baptist, might have different practices within their church. So think of it that way. Within your Green Witch practice, there can be a lot of different versions of that. They do tend to have the same overall beliefs and practices, but within that there can be a lot of different practices. You do not have to completely follow the Green Witch pathway in every form or function to be considered a Green Witch. It just is what works for you and what resonates for you. Okay, so let's start talking about left versus middle versus right. And there's a lot of discussion about these three, and there actually tends to be a lot of misunderstanding about them. And I'm going to explain it to you the way that I think about it. So it's very important independently for you to identify which of these three pathways you follow or intend to follow, or maybe even have followed in the past. I actually have a friend who has in the past followed one of these pathways but has chosen a different pathway now. So all of that is relevant to your practice, but ultimately each of us will identify which one of these we will practice. It's very important to your practice whether you're left, middle, or right, and that's going to make sense here in a minute. No matter which pathway you're following, every witch will have a left, middle, or right path in addition to it. This is not good versus evil, and it tends to be thought of that way. I don't like to think of it that way because I don't believe that any one person or their practice is evil. It is just different from someone else's. That does not make it bad. It is just their practice. And everyone has their own idea about what that should be. For me, whenever I'm considering left, middle, or right, I think of it more as my morality path. Let's explain each one of these, and you'll understand why I consider it a morality path and less of a witchcraft pathway. Okay? Let's talk about the left-hand pathway. Typically, those that follow the left-hand pathway choose magic that is considered by the majority to be taboo, so to speak. They typically work against the status quo. Some people would refer to the left-handers as eating meat in a vegetarian community. There's nothing wrong with it. It is just their way of being. Okay? So one thing I want to really send home here is if someone tells you that they practice the left-hand pathway, that should never trigger in your mind that they are a bad person. And that is something that is very, very misunderstood. This is just what they believe, just as much as you believe what you believe. So we are not ever going to discriminate against other witches, just as we don't discriminate about other people. Okay? So this is just different. If you practice a different pathway, morality pathway, that's okay. And it's okay for them to practice this too. They tend to embrace sexuality and incorporate it into their practice. That's not always the case. Okay? Sometimes it might be Satanism or whatever it may be. But there are just certain things that fall under this category that tend to be quote unquote against the norm, as I said, against the status quo, that type of thing that just puts them on this pathway. Okay, so for the right-handed pathway, it is exactly the opposite of that. They very much adhere to a traditional moral code, societal code. They adopt most of the typical social conventions, okay? But in addition to that, they often divide the concepts of mind, body, and spirit into separate entities. So, a lot of the times, the people who are following the right handed pathway believe that different practices tend to heal and favor one of those entities. I know this is a little bit hard to understand. Unfortunately, the easiest way to understand it would be to say the left handed is dark magic, whereas the right handed is white magic. But I just want to be very clear that neither one of those things are bad or good, they are just different. So the middle pathway is exactly what you think it is, it falls right in the middle. Most of these people believe that different circumstances call for different approaches. Sometimes the middle pathers might believe that karma is not something served up by the universe, but from their fellow man. Okay? So if you are good to them, they are good to you. If you are not good to them, they don't tend to be good to you. If they believe you are deserving of certain behavior, no matter what it is, that tends to be what you get. A lot of people tend to ride this middle line. Even if it is just from a morality standpoint and less of a practice standpoint, like what you are actually performing. But this is very important moving forward in your practice. In my opinion, I believe that you need to pick this thing first. Which side of the morality paths do you want to be on? Neither side is wrong. Neither side is right. It's just a practice. Nothing more. It doesn't have to be anything more serious than that. It's just whatever you believe and whatever is comfortable for you. Let's talk about how these three pathways fit into your own practice. I've got this diagram here for you, and it's not complete. This is just an example, okay? So these are your witchcraft pathways. In my opinion, the first thing you want to do is pick your morality path, left, middle, or right. Once you have decided on that, then pick your witchcraft pathway. Do you want to be a green witch? Are you a hedge witch? Are you a combination of all those things? Are you a chaos witch? Whatever that may be. Now, some practices and pathways are inherently one path, one morality path. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how that falls. Typically, it's less these pathways falling inherently under the right-handed pathway and more of some pathways falling under the left-handed pathway. For example, we are not going to discuss this in this class, but the satanic pathway inherently falls under the left-hand pathway. And I'm sure you can understand why that's the case. But you have other pathways. For example, a green witch can follow a left path just as much as they can a right. And that's a huge misconception. Okay? People just have a tendency to think that there is a right or wrong morality path for these witchcraft pathways, and that's not the case. You can follow whichever morality path that you would like. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about misconceptions about pathways in your practice. So, one thing that most people have wrong, and not typically in the witchcraft community, but outside of it, is that you must be either Wiccan or pagan to practice witchcraft, and that is not true. There are Christian witches. There are people that don't believe the same thing that Wiccans or pagans believe and still practice witchcraft. That is a complete myth. Also, as we've already talked about, left is bad, right is good. Not the case. We've already addressed that. Some people believe that you have to use crystals, tarot, divination tools, just certain things like that. You do not have to use anything in specific in your practice to be considered a witch. Some people think you have to have a familiar. Most of us do not. That is a complete myth. Some people do, some of witches do, but some of us just have a connection to an animal. For example, the toad is just something that really resonates with me. I can't really explain to you why. It's just something that I'm drawn to. The truth is, it's not my favorite animal, but it doesn't matter. For some reason, that is just an animal that I feel drawn to. And anytime I'm around one, I just feel connected to that. I can't explain that. And that's kind of what it's going to be like for you. Whenever you are around a familiar or an animal that you identify with, unfortunately, there's not really a lot of ways to find that out. It just happens. With that being said, I do not have a toad familiar that is with me at all times. That would be fantastic if I did, but I just don't. Now, some people already do, but not everyone does. And you don't have to have one to be considered a witch. Only women can be witches. Not true. Absolutely not true. There are plenty of male witches. There are plenty of males in our academy. We have plenty of them. Everyone can be a witch. Anyone can be a witch. You do not have to be trained to be a witch or be in a coven to be a witch. Now, let me explain that just a little bit. You don't have to, okay? You can start your own practice and develop it in your way. With that being said, we do not encourage that. An informed witch is a safe witch, okay? The more you learn, the safer you are. There are different forces and magics out there that you should not be messing with if you are not knowledgeable about it. So we do not encourage you to practice without some knowledge, but that doesn't mean that you have to be that way to be a witch. And you absolutely do not have to be in a coven. There are plenty of solitary witches. Okay, and this one is very important. Not everything magic is supernatural. There are things that are magic that just are. For example, when we use herbs in medicinal recipes, ultimately, there is a scientific backing for that. It's not supernatural. It just is what it is. Sometimes it is supernatural, but not always. And one thing I forgot to put on this list, which I want to say now, not everything that happens in your life is magic. Not everything is a sign. Sometimes things just happen and there's nothing significant about it. Sometimes it just happens. So the best thing to do is always look for the most rational explanation before you look for a sign. When you have ruled out every rational explanation, or when something is very clearly assigned to you, that's fine. But think more logically before you think magically. I hope that makes sense. Okay, you do not have to pick one pathway. You can be on several different paths. You can be, what we'll find out later, eclectic. You're just pulling from different paths. Your practice is what you make it. And you also don't have to have a witch bloodline to be a witch. If you are part of a witch bloodline, at some point, one of your ancestors picked up witchcraft without there ever being someone before them. You don't have to have a witch bloodline. If you feel drawn to this path, this craft, then it's for you. And this one really bothers me. You do not have to be physically able and healthy to be a witch. Some people believe if someone is mentally ill or disabled, or even sick for that matter, that they cannot be a witch because they might not have the same energy that someone that is able-bodied would have. That is not true. Everyone has their own energy, and that energy is represented in its own way in their magic. Witchcraft as a whole is open to any and every person that wants to be on this pathway. We do not discriminate. Every single one of us have open arms and we welcome everyone. That is something that we also push very hard in our academy, that everyone is welcome. This is a safe place for everyone. Granted, there are some exceptions to what we're allowed to discuss publicly, just because of the underage members, but that's not about this. But everyone is welcome. The path you're on, the morality you practice, your ableness, none of that matters. Whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're trans, whether you're homosexual, whether you're cisgendered, none of that matters. None of it. Every single person is welcome. You also do not have to only associate or date or marry people who are witches. That is 100% not true. My husband does not practice witchcraft at all. We get along perfectly fine. I have no IRL friends who actually practice witchcraft. The friends that I have are here in the academy, online. I did have some that were IRL, but they're not anymore. Anyway, you don't have to just associate with witches. Of course, it's always nice to have witch friends, because that it's wonderful to be able to share your practice with someone. But it doesn't have to be that way. It can be however you want. You associate with whoever resonates with you in your life. And you also don't have to practice your magic every single day. There are some witches that don't do anything for a month. There's some that don't do anything for a year. And then just one day you feel inclined to do something. That's okay. You don't have to practice every day to be considered a witch. And this one is very serious, and I want to make sure everyone hears me. Magic is not always better than medicine. I'm not saying it never is, but if you are sick, if you need medical attention in any way, especially if it's something serious, you should not try to substitute your magic for the medicinal treatment. If you have gotten hurt, if you are struggling psychologically, seek out medical treatment. Do not think that you can use your magic to heal yourself. That is not always going to be the case. If it is something that you feel confident that you can do by yourself, that's fine. But please do not think that medicine will always be secondary to magic. That is just not the case. The reason that there are medicinal treatments is because they work a lot of the times and because people need them. So not only do you need to seek out medicinal treatment if you are struggling with something, be it physically or mentally, emotionally, it doesn't matter. But we also do not discriminate against witches who do seek out medical treatment. They are still as much of a witch. Not everyone relies on their magic for everything in their life. And that's okay. You are still a witch. Okay, so I know this has been a very serious class. Moving forward, we'll probably be a little bit more lighthearted. These were just kind of some serious topics that needed to be covered and gotten out of the way. Okay, if you've been in my classes before, then you know I don't typically take this serious of a tone. But this, just for me, is a very serious part of the craft. So let's go ahead and get into your homework questions. Like I said at the beginning, what I'm going to have you do is just answer these questions in our homework channel. Again, it's not required. I do encourage it, but it's totally up to you. And if you're uncomfortable answering any of these questions, you can answer the ones you're comfortable with. So number one, which morality path do you think that you fall in and why? And remember, nobody here is going to judge you no matter which one you pick. And if that happens, we will stop that immediately. Okay? Now, with that being said, I know that there are some topics that fall under the left-handed morality path that we do not allow discussion of here in the academy. To be clear, the reason we do not allow that is because sometimes it can be triggering to people and we have underage members, so we have to consider them. But that does not mean that your path is wrong. We are not judging you. We're just trying to make sure that we don't trigger people or offend those that are underage. Okay. Number two, of all the misconceptions that we discussed, which one were you most surprised to hear? And it could have surprised you because maybe you didn't even think people believed that that was something that could be the case. Or maybe you're surprised because you fully believed it and found out the opposite. So either way, Okay, that's all I've got for you all today. This will probably end up being our longest class just because there was a lot to cover. And I know this one's probably 30 minutes or so. Moving forward, there'll be smaller classes, a little bit lighter on material, and not quite as serious. Okay? All right, you all have a great week, and I will catch you next week. Bye.